Everyone, our plenary session will start, so please take your seat. So in our plenary session, we are very pleased to invite Professor Qingyan Chen to give a plenary keynote speech. Professor Chen, I believe most of you are very familiar with him. He's a chair professor of building thermal science, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Also, he's the director of PolyU Academy of Interdisciplinary Research. Also, most of us know he is the editor-in-chief of Building and Environment since 2008, winner of Distinguished Achievement Awards from IBIBSA. I believe he has a lot of titles, so we have no time to introduce all these titles for him. So today he will give a talk, simulations of airborne disease transmissions in enclosed environments. So let's give our warmest welcome to Professor Chen.
Thank you very much, Professor Li, for your kind introduction. When I prepare this talk, and then I'd like also to just give a little bit commercial here. You know, I moved to Hong Kong 2 years ago, and many people ask me, what are you doing there? So I needed to give you a little bit advertisement here. So especially when you look at the PolyU Academy for Interdisciplinary Research, so people are thinking, well, what you are doing in that type of research? So the Hong Kong Polytechnic University established this academy 2 years ago. I am the current funding director. So what we try to do is to make the solutions for major societal challenges. And this makes me remember about 35 years ago when I was at the Berger's lab at the Delft University of Technology. And then I was asking my boss, you know, Berger is a very famous scientist in fluid mechanics. It's the Berger's equation. But my boss said, no, that's wrong. He is not only famous in fluid mechanics. He actually is very famous in making very special career. For example, he decided to teach at the University of Maryland when he was 60 years old. And that really impressed me. That's why I follow his step. You know, I moved to Hong Kong, and I'm much older than him. So this we call PAIR is try to work with a number of different issues. So under PAIR, currently we have 11 research institutes and 6 research centers. So we work on the cities, advanced technologies, and well-being and health. So we not try to understand where the beginning of the universe. No, we often think that's the problem for the University of Hong Kong. But at PolyU, we try to address the basic need of a human being. We say this in Chinese, 衣食住行. So at the PAIR, we have over 500 senior researchers our research revenue in the past academic year is over 600 million. So it's quite a lot of money. Now let's get started with my main talk today. So I think, many of you, I just met you about more than 4 years ago. And the main reason we know that is due to COVID-19. Now, if you look at the COVID, right, in the beginning, the World Health Organization and also US CDC, they published some results like this. They say, okay, of course, you should be very careful. But in the beginning, they often believe this format transmission is a major issue. But thanks to of the scientists in the building science area, which is led by Professor Lydia Molesky from the Queen's University of Technology, and then Don Milton from the University of Maryland. They work very hard, try to convince the World Health Organization and also the CDC. So as a result, a year later, the organization changed the definition how COVID is transmitted. So you can see from the US CDC in 2020, they changed the transmission is mainly through the respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs, sneezes, and talks. So the format becomes a secondary effect. And that's why we believe we have a major key role here. And that's because many of us are working on the HVAC, right? That's about air. Now, if you look at the, how the COVID-19 virus is generated, CDC already mentioned a few, and to be complete, I like to list them. Of course, cough is very important, right? Even in China, when you lift the restriction, and then everywhere you hear the cough, and that's really is a major issue. In addition, when people talk, that's also cause a huge, bigger problem. I believe in the beginning in Wuhan, many people got the disease because they had a bigger feast, they eat, they talk, although there was no cough at that time, but there was a big environment for the transmission. Then breathing, we also threat quite a lot of virus. So this is the three major ones CDC mentioned. In addition, we also, from our stools and urine, there also been detected that virus there. So today I'm going just to look at the, in the beginning, just wanted to look at the size of the virus, and then we can see why talking, coughing, sneezing is important. Those this slide just show a number of very viruses we have. And the one I circled there is a SARS, okay? So the SARS, what happens, started in Hong Kong in 2003, 20 years ago. And 18 years later, we have a COVID. It's a similar type of virus. So it's very small. You can see the size is only 120 nanometer. But if you look at the a typical cough, okay? Let's say the particle diameters in the horizontal coordinate, you can see there. And this is the number in the vertical coordinate. So you can see the majority of the particles is in the size of 10 to, say 1 to 10 micron. And that's very big because the virus I mentioned is only 120 nano. That's somewhere here. So any size of a particle we generate, you can feel or you can detect it contains a lot of virus. And that's why the transmission is very easy when your virus is so small. Now, in the early days, this is just from the TV in the US. Can somebody click that for me? Okay, this is about the cough, right? And in the University of Florida, there was a study showing that, okay, if you cough, and typically the droplet can go about 6 feet or 2 meters behind. And this is how the US CDC say, okay, we need to maintain a social distance of 2 meters. But that's only for a very normal cough, because sometimes the cough is not so strong and doesn't go very far. But sometimes the cough can be very strong and which can go much further than 2 meters. So we try to do the simulation by using the computational fluid dynamics, or CFD. And we have one person here cough, right? And these different colors will represent the different size. Very small ones, because of a thermal buoyancy, it really goes just upwards. And then larger ones, about like 10 micron or so, it can go, for people just like you see 2 meters. And this is under very special condition. If you look at the title there, it's in quiescent air. So the air does not move. And we are engineers, right? Building engineers. We study the airflow. We know that even in this large conference room, air moves all the time. And therefore, to maintain this 2 meter social distancing is very difficult. And how could we change that? You see that in the past, we put some screens between 2 tables in a restaurant and that type of. Okay, but will that be useful? We can discuss later. Okay, let's assume this is really in a room without any air movement, and then the particle moves like that. But in the reality, cough is not like the one in the top. Let the person cough, you don't cover anything. In reality, when we cough, we always have different gestures, right? You'll see in the lower part. You might use a piece of tissue, or you might use a cold hand, or you do the fist, and then you cough into the sleeves, or you cough into an elbow. And that's our normal behavior. The only situation you see people cough like that when you take the airplane, if you are from America or from Europe, you sit in an airplane, you fall into sleep, then of course you cough like the one in the top. So those are all possible scenarios. Now, when you cough like that, now we usually smoke to see the visualization, right? They behave very differently. The air, the droplet does not go directly to the front. Instead, they go up and down, sometimes go to the left and right. And they are very different. So let me just show you our simulation of this scenario. Okay, we usually visualization to determine the boundary conditions. So we make different openings just to simulate a mouth, right? And then we put it into a room typically small one, just like an office, and you have air coming in like that and going out like this. And because of the air from the mechanical systems and the thermal buoyancy from the human beings, and the airflow pattern is very, very complex, even in this room with just 2 persons and without any furniture. So now we look at the different coughing scenario, right? With the air conditioning system goes on. Now you find that uncovered cough, that's the one normally TV will show you, right? You just cough without cover your mouth, and then it can go to another person. But any other scenario, you see, cough doesn't go to the other party, which is about, say, 1.5 meters apart. And that's the reality. But of course, when you look at the TV, they show you unrealistic cough is more or less like this scenario. And that's, I think, it's very wrong. by saying that you need to keep 2 meters apart. Because in a lot of cases, you really see this type of transmission. And when I was in Hong Kong, you know, many Hong Kongers are pretty short. And I have a staff who is very short, and she told me, oh, in a subway, I'm afraid to sit down. And I said, why you are afraid to sit down? She said, I'm short. And then if somebody was coughing, talking, and sneezing, and it will go to her face directly if she sit down. I said, that's wrong. In fact, when you are short, right? And then I'm in the subway, I stand in front of this person, and that one actually go directly to me because I'm short. Maybe my breathing level is here. So if you are short, you are in this because all these rooms of the virus is going up due to thermal buoyancy. So this is really triggers me. I think the study by using the fluid mechanics really make a lot of sense. We can protect people much better. But to determine this type of boundary conditions from your coughing, talking, sneezing is not that easy. But we can do that, right? I mean, we use a flow visualization. As you can see on the left two figures, you can determine the direction. And currently, we can also use medical device. This is a medical device. If you want to go to hospital, sometimes they measure how much you can breathe out. This is a very easy, accurate way. So with this type of equipment, we can measure the cough. And this is a typical cough. A typical cough normally lasts about 0.5 seconds. And the velocity, you can see the peak velocity is about flow rate is about 5 liters per second. All right, so you can measure it very precisely the boundary conditions you need for a cough. And you can do the same thing. This is our breath, right? Typically, you think your breath is a sinus function, and it is too. It really looks like a sinus function. The most difficult one is talking. So how you talk, you generate a very different type of flow rate, but we still can measure it. This is a rainbow passage on the right. You know, people talk, let's say a rainbow passage contain all the English phonetics. So you can really see how much each phonetics produces, and then we have the result. So we can determine the flow boundary condition. Then the public health scientists, they can also measure how much virus is being produced, and then we have a boundary condition. Now today I'm going to use an airplane as an example because many of you were afraid to travel during the pandemic. And I wanted to explain to you the transmission of the COVID-19 in airplane. So in most of our airplane, except the Boeing 787, we typically take the air from the engine because the outside air is very cold, temperature is low, pressure is very low. So you need the engine to make it into high temperature, high pressure. Then you go through an air conditioning pack, which you do the inverse Brayton cycle. You learn that in the thermodynamics, and then you can make it into the right temperature, right pressure. And then you can send it into the cabin. Then after you send it into the cabin, the air is still very clean. So you use a half of that to control the pressure in the cabin. Another half, you use this filter to refilter that, and therefore to save the energy. And that's the typical air conditioning system for commercial airplane. Now the air, when it's sent into the cabin, we use this so-called complete mixing system, okay? This is for a Boeing 767. The air is going like that. And for other systems, sometimes it just goes reverse way. But anyway, all the commercial airplanes use this well mixing condition. Why you want to use well mixing conditions? Because you want to make sure the design of the air conditioning system is for thermal comfort reason. So you don't want to have a temperature stratification. So to make the temperature as uniform as possible, you use this well mixing system. So it's good for thermal comfort, but it's very bad for air quality. Why? Because when somebody was coughing, sneezing, or whatever, then this system will mix all the viruses together, and then you will breathe in the virus. So I also wanted to show you the airplane. In fact, it can be a problem, all right? So in early studies, I wanted to use the case, this is for the SARS case. There was an airplane from Hong Kong to Beijing in 2003. So there was an indicted person who sit in the airplane, let's say indicted persons there, and who infected more than 20 people. So those darker ones are the people who were infected. And what is said as a result, for this 2.5-hour flight, 4 of the passengers died as a result. So you find this case was well studied and was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, how can we simulate that case, right? So we use the computational fluid mechanics. We first calculate the airflow pattern, as you see on the left side. Of course, I just wanted to show you how could we do the correct result. So we use a clean room data to show here. This is not in the airplane, right? So you can calculate the airflow pattern. And then you can use the so-called uranium model. You calculate the concentration of a virus. You can get the result like this if I put a source somewhere here, right? So in that location. Then another way you can do is to track the movement of each particle. So I will show you in the Lagrangian model. Can you play the Lagrangian model simulation? And the Lagrangian model, you see, I have the source, there's a lot of green particles there, and they go with the air, right? And then you can also calculate the concentration. So the concentration shown in the figures here. And let's measure the data. So you can see that these two models give a very good result compared with the measured data. That's why we like to use this model to study the airflow and particle distributions in the airplane. So we compare the two methods in the airplane, and those are the results. So uranium model, because it calculates concentration, so you always can get a very smooth result. But Lagrangian model, it depends on how many particles you put it in. Sometimes your result is not very smooth, but they are very similar. And therefore, no matter which one you should get a very good result. And I wanted to show you, in an airplane, if somebody cough, and the particle can go like that. And this is a very powerful cough, okay? If you sleep, you don't know, you don't cover your mouth, you might get the result like that. But in reality, it's different. Okay, my student simulate this is a Boeing 76 model. Can somebody click this one for me? So we assume there was a passenger sitting here. Can you play the movie? Yeah. So he coughs. Normally, cough is not very powerful when you are in the airplane, you are at sleep, right? Then particles can just go on and on. It's really mixed with the surrounding air. So, of course, after a while, you sit in the airplane. For example, you are from London to here, might take about 10 hours. Then eventually you will find that you will be infected if you sit very close to this infected person. So that's the result, US CDC or WHO tell you that you don't sit too close to that person. So normally they will quarantine this row and 2 row behind and 2 row in the front. Okay, so that's a typical, quarantine is done in that way. There's still a lot of people, if you have a Boeing 747, each row is 10 people, you quarantine 5 rows, that's already 50 people. So that's not a very nice scenario. So if let the assumption, my calculation suppose is right, then you will say that, okay, I take even 3 rows before, 3 rows behind, and of course you find that a lot of dark position there, they are infected. However, in some case, in this scenario, there was 2 people sit 7 rows away. They were still getting infected. So what's the reason behind that? So we suspect that if let's somebody moving around, which might cause the issue. So let's do a simulation. We even with somebody, passenger or crew member walking along the aisle. So here is the result, okay? Because the indicted person sit in that location, and then somebody was walking, and then go further, 7 rows down here, and then stop here, you can see the virus does transfer into the 2 passengers there. So of course, this is just one possible scenario. You might believe or you might not believe, that's your judgment, but we believe this is an interesting result. Okay, so this was the old result, even before COVID-19. Now with the COVID-19, now we have new data. So we needed to make sure we can simulate a good result. So now we have to use the data from COVID-19 because SARS is very different from COVID-19. And there was a study done before, and on the different coughing. Okay, so when you have a cough, and the cough, you have a different size of the droplet, right? That's in terms of diameter, and that's the number. And then in each size, they also measure how much virus is there. So you can also determine the total virus copies inside. So with that information, and then we can simulate a scenario. This is the real scenario. This is a Vietnamese airline, Flight 54 from London to Hanoi in 2020, very early. This is a Boeing 787 commercial airplane. That's a business class cabin. So that's a passenger sitting in this position was the indicted patient. Can you play the animation? So we assume, because at that time, there was nobody wear any masks. Because in the beginning, nobody knows there was a COVID, right? So that person was sitting in an airplane. Ooh. What's going on? Okay. Anyway, you see this flow is around. So as a result, okay, the indicted passenger is actually 5K. Okay, and this is a business class cabin. So the double aisles here, that's row 1. Okay, so you can see different colors. All right, the yellow one was not infected. Then this purple color, that one was not, no information because they couldn't find the passenger. But all this brown color were infected. Quite a number of people, just one patient, right? Almost infected the entire business class cabin. And this is a 12 hours flight from London to Hanoi. And the public health scientists provide us the information. If you inhale more than 1,000 virus copy, you will get the virus, you will get the COVID. So we use that one as an example, right? Then this is how this one is corresponding to that result. And sorry, we did the simulation, and this is our simulated the result. So we find those people will get, and some of them will not get infected. We don't really get 100% right, but we get 87% right. So this is just use a real case to this method can be used. We also simulate another one I didn't show here is for the flight from Singapore to Hangzhou in 2020. In that airplane, person was infected, and the others are not. And the main difference is that from Singapore to Hangzhou, almost all the passengers wear masks, although there was a 4 index patient. So wear masks make a lot of difference. But of course, in the airplane, the airflow pattern is so complex. I just show you, this is the Chinese new airplane, C919. And you will just randomly take a few rows here. You see, even the conditions look the same, but their airflow patterns are always look very complicated. So to make our result, is really true. So we use a real commercial airplane, and this is an old airplane. It's an MD-82, and in the first class cabin, we have just one mannequin which generates the particles, and then we can measure that the distribution. So let's say first class cabin have 3 rows. So we measure the result, and then we also use the CFD simulation. You probably just need to look at the result of this one and that one. You get a very similar result. So no matter it's in real case or in the lab case, we got a very similar result. So we believe this is a good model to do the prediction. And therefore, we can also calculate this based on not only the virus copy. That's Harvard University, that's Professor Wells developed this well-ready equation. They can also use to predict the infection. And we find also very similar result. Now let's go back to the mask, because I mentioned to you, mask can be very important, right? Then in the beginning of the COVID, at that time, there was no masks available on the market, right? Everyone at that time was really looking for masks, but no masks sold on the market, and therefore the US CDC said, okay, do whatever you have, right? The best you will use the N95 mask. If it's not available, you try the surgical mask. Even surgical masks, you cannot buy that, then you use this bandana that might help. But of course, the efficiency is very different. So not our study. So early studies show different efficiency. For N95, your efficiency could be 90%. For surgical mask, it's about 30%. And for bandana, it's about 10%. But 10% is better than nothing. So we do a really rough calculation. If you have a million of virus generate, how much can be removed by wearing different masks? And we calculate it by using N95, combine the effect. I mean, in that patient and yourself, okay, both wear N95, you can remove 99%. And by surgical mask, 58%, and then bandana, 20%. But we doubt if the result will be so good. So therefore, in my lab, we use a mannequin and real person to do the experiment. So we use a real person, human subject, to generate with a mask, right? To generate the particles. Then we use a machine and then a human simulator to see how much you really inhale. So this is the result, okay? So surgical mask on the left, N95 mask on the right. You definitely see very different result. N95 is much better than surgical mask because the color, red color, means a very high velocity, and it means also a lot of leakages, right? And we find very interesting result here. Okay, I just take a talking as an example because I can reach it here, right? If inject patient and yourself don't wear masks, you will have inhale quite a lot of particles. Then if you have a social distancing of 2 meters, then you find you can reduce quite a lot, right? Then if you have just one side where a surgical mask, you can reduce it even further. So social distancing is useful, but not as useful as masks, right? Then if you have the N95 masks, it's better than surgical mask, but just better a little bit, not that much. Okay, so this is the result we really tell the airplane industry. You know, in the beginning, you remember that they just try to not sell the middle seat. That is not very useful. We said you make sure everyone wear a mask. That will be helpful. And that's why, you know, in the later stage, they just really give you the masks rather than to block the middle seat. So also you see that in the beginning there was people put the face shield, right? It's a face shield. Even I taught at that time at the Purdue University, they give me the face shield and then continue to teach. And we said this is not useful. Just the result, this is not our research, but I wanted to show you that the result did by other people. The reference is at the bottom. It's not very useful, only for very small aerosols. Otherwise, the face shield is give you false protection. Okay, now you have a problem. Can you solve the problem, right? Now I wanted to see how we could solve the problem. So we try to develop a new type of ventilation system. Put the ventilator in front of your seat, but not exactly in front of the seat, because all of you know that your leg room is very important. You wanted to put your legs in front of the seat. So we put the diffuser just somewhere in between. So you see there's a lot of electronic boxes there. And then you supply the air from the displacement ventilation, and instead of complete mixing, you try to extract the air on the top. So this is how the real physical system in our lab look like. And we implemented this into a cabin mock-up. So as a result, I wanted to show you this. So we still, let me see, why? Okay, this is under the complete mixing system, the current system. Why do you stop in the middle? Okay, current system, you see, in the beginning, and then it mix, and they go everywhere, right? So I don't know why the animation didn't repeat, but you can imagine, it just go everywhere. Now, with the new system, okay, now, of course, it still generate, but this particle is going up and go in exhaust to the outside. Let me play it one more time. This is the old system, and this, yeah, now this is a new system. So the new system particle doesn't go everywhere. It's mainly being extracted by the outlet. So we think this should be the future systems. So we also compare with the current system for a long term, and then those blue means a very low risk of infection, red means a high risk of infection. The current system has a higher risk. And of course, later on, other researchers, for example, from Columbia University, they invented this UV system. So this UV is not harmful to your eyes. So they can put it into the cabin. Then some other designers, they also design this different shield, try to block the particle transmission. Quite a lot of other effort as well. But one more thing I wanted to emphasize, this is a research resulted by my former student, Tim Fei, on the airplane toilet. You know, now a lot of health organizations tell you, when you flush toilet, close the toilet lid. And this is just two scenarios. One with the lid open, another lid closed. The particle transmission is very different. Then someone might argue with me, you know, toilet is your own stool, why you care? Of course, in your home, that's all your stuff. But you are in the airplane, it matters a lot. Because in the airplane, people often wait to get into the toilet, right? And if you leave it open, like on the left, then the next person getting in might get infected. Okay, so let's also we call this fecal oral transmission might be possible in that case. So to conclude my talk, I wanted to mention a few things. You know, the virus dose is very important, right? And then the virus concentration times the exposure duration is also important. If you take a plane for 30 minutes or you take a plane for 12 hours, they are different. So the dose is the concentration times the exposure time. So the air exchange is not in the equation. Many airliners during the pandemic always tell you, oh, our exchange rate is 20 or 30 times per hour. So the airplane is very clean. And that's not true. Because I always give them this example, right? I have 100 passengers and each passenger generates so many viruses. And then you look at 10 liter per person ventilation rate, and then you can easily calculate what the concentration will be. So in this case, right, if the cabin volume is 180 cubic meter, so as a result, the air change rate is very high, 20 times. Now, if we look at the building, right, the size is much bigger. I still have the same number of people, same ventilation rate, but because the building is much bigger, so as a result, my air change rate is 2 times per hour. So which one is better? In fact, they are the same in terms of the virus concentration. So you get a bigger volume, then you will reduce the air rate. That means the air becomes cleaner. So to conclude, I think today I just show you the current ventilation system in the commercial airplane has a very limited longitudinal flow, but the particle could be generated and then transported quite a lot in the cabin. Also, moving people can play an important role in the air cabin. We use the CFD, which can really calculate the virus transmission. Mask is actually more helpful than the put this social distancing. And I believe we can do something by using new ventilation system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chen. So not only explain why we have infection of COVID-19, but also give solution. So we do have time for maybe 1 or 2 short questions. So any question from the audience? Please. So maybe we have a microphone for you.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Tanya from IIT Kharagpur, India. Very nice presentations, sir, very informative. I would like to know your thoughts on the transformation of particles through particulate matter. Because from where I come from, people use public transport a lot, like buses and trains. And PM 2.5 and PM 10 are the biggest problems we face in India. So please throw some light on how the transmission would be through those particles, because the size is pretty close. And maybe while coughing or talking, when in a very polluted environment or on the street, maybe, and a lot of houses and buildings are dependent on natural ventilation also. So particulate matter keeps on revolving in the indoor environment as well. So how that scenario would be according to your understanding?
Okay, if I understand it correctly, for buildings with the natural ventilation, how the particle transmission will have the impact, right? I think typically if you measure, I think many of us measure the ventilation rate in buildings with natural ventilation. The ventilation rate is very high compared with the mechanical ventilation. So I could just look at the two scenarios I just compare in an airplane, in the buildings. If you use a higher ventilation rate, that really matters. So if your building is with natural ventilation, I think the risk is much lower. And that was also why, during the pandemic period, all the restaurants, they cannot serve food inside of building. They have to serve outside of building, open table, whatever, especially in Europe, in America, right? And that's, I think it's a very good one. But, some restaurants made a mistake. On the outside, they build an enclosure and it becomes indoors. But they can argue, I'm on the street level, but I say you are enclosed, that it becomes indoors. So if you really make a lot of ventilation going through, then the risk will be much lower.
We may have no time for further questions. So if anyone you have questions to Professor Chen, maybe you can ask him during the coffee break. So again, let's give our thanks to Professor Chen. So we have 5 minutes break so that we can move to our plenary session. So thank you all for all the participants to attend the plenary session. So thank you.
这一团因为还有好久，
今儿就没了是吧？
还是说的是4点半结束的。
还要录吗？没了吧？哦，要录是吧？
对，
要录，对。我坐会儿得了。
比我闪呀。照片这才不让咱们企业后面是看。是。这不有素材没？有素材没有是吧？我不知道什么我直接上上查1点。读法器啊，查一下看就是素材没有。小的嘛，没事了已经。快进起来啊！这才几点呀？2点半，他昨天已经好了，是吧？今天别有事了，今天帮我回去看看，帮我翻译。到。
行。
还有我的，看一下，3个
我就说嘛，45分钟，谁能讲很久啊？
我要回去看一下。好。哇。放屁！干什么嘲讽？妈！前路。好，我都前路了，把人下车了。16分钟前，我的圣品正在今天到达。
We got it. But it was, I think this just ended now. So yeah, okay. Yep. Yeah. I don't know if they will have any streaming of the sessions or if they're just going to, it's just recordings afterwards. Yeah. But at least the virtual sessions have a Zoom link, so that should be.
Our virtual session is working.
Eh? 有吗？啊，是。哎，
丢咱俩是。哎呀，这啥时候能歇呀，同志们？
可以啊，这每一个可以。这玩意儿。这是应该是最。